After the playthrough I did with whips, I wanted to try another really common challenge run that just isn't really a challenge run and prove that it isn't difficult. For the whip playthrough, I went in basically blind to how good the whip would be, but for this run I pretty much know for sure that bows are actually insanely powerful if you build for them correctly. I was initially debating whether I should just use a bow as my primary weapon or if I should try to do an actual bow-only playthrough, but I figured the latter would be more interesting and more fun. As such, I have to start as the hunter class since it's the only one that starts with a bow. That does mean sprinting past most of the asylum, but that's really not an issue at this point. No plunging attack on the asylum demon either, but each shot does 52 damage and that damage can be dealt at range, so it's incredibly easy if a bit slow. Before getting the bow I'll be using for the entire run, I figured it would be better to grab the large ember for reasons that should be pretty obvious soon. The depths clip is very easy if you know how, and I have plenty of experience using this glitch in many runs. From the first bit of the berg, you can jump over onto the ledge with the humanity, then climb down to the bottom of the ladder, climb back up to the top, and roll over the wall to get out of bounds. From there, you just drop onto the ledge of the wall of the lower berg, drop through it, and follow a pretty specific path to get back in bounds. Then you can just run back up to the top of the depths and get the ember. Definitely much quicker than the alternative of running to the parish, getting the basement key, going through the lower berg, and killing the capper demon. I don't think that would have been all that much harder, but regardless. I also decided to rescue Laurentius, both because I like him, but more importantly because he gives me the pyromancy flame later. Initially, I thought the black bow would be the highest damage by quite a bit, having S scaling and dexterity, but after a couple tests, it turns out that the compound bow, with CC scaling, actually outdoes it by quite a bit. The black bow is slightly better at range, but not by that much. That means a couple of good things. First of all, it's much easier to get, but more importantly, the compound bow is a short bow, while the black bow is a long bow, so the attack speed of the compound bow is significantly faster. The range is lower, but with most of the difficult enemies being bosses, that shouldn't be an issue at all. If I really need it, the hawk ring should be more than enough. I do also have to upgrade both strength and dexterity rather than only dexterity, but that also isn't really much of an issue since you can't fire a bow without two-handing it, meaning I only need to get to 27 strength for the soft cap rather than 40. Sprinting through New Londo ruins for the compound bow is pretty easy, all things considered. The ghosts will always stagger you if they hit you unless you used a curse and have decent poise, neither of which are true for me, but the only one that's even vaguely difficult to pass is the one just before the staircase before the fog wall. Just lure it forward a tiny bit and roll behind it, and no issues will be had. Since I'm already here and usually do it anyway, I'm going to go ahead and shoot inward to get the crest key, lower the water, and grab the very large ember along with a couple chunks down here. I'm not going to be farming since they're just enough to get a plus 15 without having to grind it all, and I got a small boon later in this run that would have made grinding for a chunk or two even more pointless. With those gathered, the red tearstone ring is vital to what I want to show off, so now is a great time to go ahead and grab that. I'm pretty sure this is the second time I've ever actually gone this way, since it's much easier to just go through the gate near the start of the level. The other time was a run where I wanted to get to Quelaag early but didn't have the master key. I've heard people say that you need the master key to get to Quelaag before the Taurus demon, but you can just go through here. It's actually entirely possible to survive the fall from the platform with the ring down to the ground, but it does require getting lucky with the drakes, so I just used my dark sign and got to the basin to grab the Grasscrest shield through the more common gate. On my way to Andre, I took out the crystal lizard with a couple of arrows I got from the compound bow pickup, and it gave me 2 entire chunks, which makes getting a plus 15 before Anor Londo extremely easy, but that's a bit longer coming since I need to get a few more large titanite shards. In the meantime, I'm entirely okay with duping souls for the arrows, since all that does is cut out some grinding, since I have access to the Drake Bridge now. I've also used a glitch to get into the depths early, so I'm really not all that concerned with doing this glitchless, I just don't want to breeze through the whole game. Now, to give an idea as to why I wanted the red tearstone ring to begin with, the heavy knight takes 53 damage without the ring active and 145 with. While I'm explaining why that happens, I'll be doing send skip and grabbing a few items and sends in the background. The insane boost, almost triple the damage, is why I wanted to do this run in the first place, and why I don't think it's going to be difficult at all. That ended up not being entirely true. I did struggle with a few places, and I do have a way to get more damage, but for now, this is the main thing I wanted to mess with. The way the red tearstone ring works is by multiplying your weapon's motion value by 1.5 times, not by multiplying your raw damage, which is how Power Within works, as far as I can tell at least. Almost all one-handed light attacks have a motion value of 100, or a 1 times multiplier, and two-handed light attacks have a motion value of 120, a 1.2 times multiplier as an example. This means that the two-handed light attack of any weapon will get a much larger boost from the red tier stone ring than the R1, but this also means that bows get a massive boost because their motion values are significantly higher than pretty much any other weapon in the game, other than like great bows, I assume. The damage won't quite be tripled for every enemy because of damage calculations, but it will pretty reliably be at least doubled. Alright, with the relatively complicated explanation out of the way, plenty of large titanite shards gathered, 999 feathered and large arrows, and nearly enough chunks to get to plus 14, I suppose now is a great time to fight the stray demon. Real quick though, that last chunk is easy to get from the Black Knight in the Berg. Obviously I can't riposte with a bow, but I can just as easily fire an arrow after every parry. With that, the stray demon should be very easy. Getting past the torch hollows with a bow is hilariously easy compared to how annoying they can sometimes be. The damage without RTSR isn't abysmal considering the stats I have right now despite being at plus 14, but once it's activated with some chip damage from the butt slam through the shield, it's plenty to take out the demon very quickly, especially considering the range of the bow and the moveset of the demon. Using the souls from the demon, I can get a cool 20/20 in both strength and dexterity before running up to the gargoyles with RTSR range from a random hollow along the way. This is what I meant by range not really mattering. Boss arenas are too small and bosses are too aggressive for that to matter pretty much at all, and I do an easy 400 damage to the gargoyles with large arrows, which are the arrows with the highest AR. 3 hits for the first gargoyle and 2 for the second are all it takes. I also wanted to flex on the Titanite demon because of how much pain it's caused me in the past, killing it with only 4 arrows. I want to fight the Taurus demon next because I think it'll be funny, and it's pretty easy to clear out the rest of this stuff early on. 3 whole arrows takes out the Taurus demon nearly instantly, but I don't think that's a good premonition for what's to come in the lower berg. I'm genuinely a little worried about the thieves since I need to get close for them to activate in the first place. I should be able to one-shot maybe 2 without RTSR, but getting that hit or 2 might take some effort. Luckily, the dogs at least were a non-issue, since the first couple can be lured into the fire and the others can be easily sniped from a distance. The tiny target shield the thieves wield does prevent the one-shot and makes it remarkably hard to kill them, but with how long their attack is and how quickly the bow can release, getting a good hit isn't generally that difficult. Nogging an arrow and holding it for just long enough isn't the most useful skill, but it's definitely nice to know you can use for enemies like this. The Capra Demon obliterated me in my first attempt because I went in with RTSR health and messed up on my first roll, but after a couple attempts to get back in the groove of the game and not trying to use RTSR, using a very normal strategy of running up the stairs almost didn't work, but with a small modification of jumping down and taking out the dogs from range made the Capra Demon very easy. I'm pretty sure I'd still be able to one-shot the dogs, if not two-shot with a +5, so I'm not too concerned with having gotten the large ember early. The depths are incredibly easy with the bow. The giant rat poses literally no threat, the little rats usually run away, and the big ones next to the channeler can be taken out from range, along with the channeler, meaning the only mild threat left is the gaping dragon. The slimes are a very easy way to get into RTSR range, which means doing a lot of damage to the dragon, but also means having to deal with weird hitboxes a lot more carefully. With good positioning, it's likely possible to take out the boss before it even recovers from its first charge, but I didn't have that positioning. Luckily, it used a stomp attack that made it a joke to deal with afterward anyway. I expected Blighttown to be a little annoying until I remembered that I've ran through it completely naked several times. You can run past the first few enemies and jump down to the platform with the Nito before quitting out at the bonfire to get the blow dart sniper to stop shooting at you. From there, it's pretty easy to just sprint past the fire dogs before dropping down to the wall hugger, taking out the odd enemy or two that decides to aggro when you're close to it, and quitting out to de-aggro anything else that may be following you. The wall hugger literally cannot hit you when you use range since, it can't move, making it a non-issue, allowing me to grab power within, which will be very useful later in the run. From there, dropping down to the whip platform and down to the bottom of Blighttown is very easy and very fast. This is kinda why I love Blighttown so much. If you know what you're doing, it takes less than 2 minutes to get through, but if you don't, it's an incredibly fun 3D maze that can be extremely confusing to navigate. Genuinely such a great level, and the old console versions of this game really did it dirty with their performance. The Quelaag fight is genuinely pretty funny, since hitting her human half instantly stuns her, so you can time your shots just so that you essentially stun lock her. It's really easy and makes Quelaag a joke with any bow build. I did mess up and get hit once, but after that I just waited for her to do an attack, aimed, and shot again. I decided to do the Ceaseless Cheese just so I could entirely focus on the kind of damage I was doing to him, and the hitboxes in this fight are really dumb. I'm doing 406 damage to Ceaseless at this point, and I'm still a bit off of soft caps, not to mention not even using the true damage potential of this build yet. Now with both bells ring, it's an easy elevator ride and climb out of Blighttown before riding up the elevator in Sens since I climbed it earlier to get all the large shards. I topped off my feather arrows before fighting the golem, since this is the only place you can get them before the giant blacksmith, as well as my large arrows, just because. I tried to get into RTSR, learned that the golem has one of, if not the most accurate hitbox in the entire game, and got killed by the grab because I didn't expect it to do that much damage. I learned my lesson and used a random enemy to get into RTSR this time, nearly staggering it with a single arrow, quickly using another and toppling it with one more. Using the bow through Anor Londo actually made it really easy. Some of the gargoyles' attacks are weirdly hard for me to read, especially the jumping and flying ones, but the bow made that a non-issue. Luckily, I was able to run past most of the painting guardians on the rafters, making them a non-issue as well. Their knives have oddly good tracking, but one curved past me, which looked kinda cool. The second gargoyle went down easier than the first because it got stuck behind some pillars and couldn't climb the stairs to reach me. The demons are usually kind of annoying because of their reach, but the arrows kind of nullify that issue, especially since they just jump off the ledge for you sometimes. The archer was actually a little more difficult because hitting an arrow after a parry can be a little fickle, but generally you just have to wait a moment before firing and you should hit no problem. Initially, I was going to fight Super Ornstein for the Leo ring, but with the build I'm going for later, I don't think that'll matter at all, and I also hate the Super Ornstein fight. It takes 4 arrows to take out Ornstein in the first phase, which is kind of insane considering he's resistant to piercing damage. Smo takes 500 damage from every arrow, 600 from counter damage, and cannot handle our range, so Super Smo goes down without issue. Next up is Sif and the Four Kings, so I don't forget the Hydra before the Archives or to place the Lord Vessel before the other lords. The Hydra isn't difficult at all with some range, meaning in my next several casual playthroughs I'll probably at least have a bow in backup for instances like this. Like the title says, this is not a challenge run. The only hard part is crowd control, and even then it's not really an issue. I wanted to fight the butterfly too, since I hardly ever do that and range makes the boss somewhat fun sometimes. Fun might be a strong word with how quickly it went down, but regardless. Sif did actually give me a bit of trouble at first because I forgot that I wasn't using a melee weapon, and I usually end up fighting Sif pretty aggressively, which doesn't work too well with the speed of the bow on top of RTSR range, but the moment I remembered that I actually have a ranged weapon, Sif went down pretty quickly and pretty easily. Just roll away instead of under, and Sif literally can't touch you. It's honestly kind of sad, especially when she starts limping. The Four Kings took me the longest of any fight so far, only because the Four Kings in RTSR range is a little annoying, since I didn't have the Crest Shield and I wanted to use my Grass Crest Shield. Difficult would definitely be an exaggeration, but I did need to get a little lucky with the moves since I had to heal after every tracking magic, and RTSR really hurt my survivability when it came to multiple kings existing at once. Getting into RTSR range was easy with the sour spots on their weapons, but it did take time that I didn't have. Eventually, I got lucky with the moves and was able to take them out pretty easily, but getting that luck did take about 30 minutes. Okay, it actually took like 10 minutes, but I choked and had to get lucky again. If there was one boss where this build would actually be a challenge, it would be this one, and that's only because of RTSR. Well, except maybe Nito. Speaking of Nito, I'm gonna go fight Nito next. Getting into Pinwheel's arena with enough HP to be in RTSR range after the drop-in took a bit of effort, but nothing too special. The 2 drops through the catacombs combined with a couple hits from a random skeleton that happened to land next to me and stripping down before the fight to minimize fall damage let me barely survive and take out Pinwheel in 3 arrows. Luckily, I never fight anything on my way through the tomb, so this was no different from normal. Sometimes I fight a single skeleton beast and the Black Knight if they follow me to the bonfire, but this time I got sniped while trying to do that and decided to just quit out to de-aggro the next time I got there. At the second bonfire, I used a humanity for a very important reason. Just as we enter the final tunnel leading to Nito, we get invaded by Paladin Leroy. He's not really capable of responding to range, though I was a little bit worried about him rolling off the edge, so I lured him into the tunnel before fighting. A parry into shooting, and again, worked just fine, and I got the Sanctus out of it. I lied about fighting Nito right now, though. I actually want to go fight Seath. I just wanted to pretend that I wasn't going to use hyper mode. The boars on the way into the archives get stuck on stuff really easily, so they don't pose a threat despite being resistant to piercing damage. Taking out the golem for the pendant was a little annoying, only because the crystal hollows really like to rush you down, and that's about the only way an enemy in this game can counter the range of the bow. I only had to deal with a couple though, since I didn't go up the stairs before fighting the golem. I let Seath curse me in the first encounter, since I needed to go through this anyway, which will make the archives a little harder, but really not by much. The only hard part is dropping onto the stairs with the channeler on top of them, and that only took me 2 tries. Also, I'm aware that you can't actually use the bow on the snake guard. I just punched him. This is an exhibition of the power of the bow, not a challenge run. I didn't get into RTSR range prior to entering the Seath fight because I genuinely just forgot, but Power Within was more than enough despite the bow almost breaking partway through the fight. Seath's moveset genuinely just can't respond to range. It's kinda sad, but mostly funny. I hate Seath. I'm honestly kinda dreading Nito, so I'm gonna go take out the Bed of Chaos first. The worm next to the bonfire before the Demon Fire Sage doesn't have any ranged moves and can't move, so you can imagine how that fight goes. The Demon Fire Sage is the first fight I actually did with Hyper Mode, and each shot was doing between 500 and 800 damage. That, combined with the range of the bow, made this one of the easiest Demon Fire Sage fights anyone has ever had. The Centipede Demon fight was similarly easy, and I was able to beat it excessively quickly. This is when I knew I had stumbled onto an unnecessarily strong build. I honestly just wanted to do this because I knew a bow with RTSR was funny, but that's kind of ridiculous. The run to the Bed of Chaos was pretty normal, but I did need to put on some sort of armor to at least slightly mitigate the damage of the lava, even with the ring. Fun fact about the lava, the damage isn't percentage based, and for some reason it scales with New Game Plus damage. In New Game Plus 6, the highest scaling cycle, it does quite a lot of damage. Anyway, the Bed of Chaos is even easier than normal with the bow. The right side can be done as normal first, then the left side can be destroyed with a safe spot before the gap in this specific corner. Then you just run to the middle like normal. Not needing to make that jump to the other side genuinely makes this boss so much easier. Alright, now it's actually time to fight Nito. Getting into hyper mode before entering the arena is impossible since you take quite a bit of fall damage, so making sure you take the right amount of damage and get into hyper mode quick enough with Nito spamming the ground stab can be a bit difficult. For some reason, Nito decided it would be a great idea to just walk into a corner in my first attempt, but after that I genuinely just failed to dodge the skeletons and random attacks a bunch. The thing is, when I did actually beat Nito, I nearly killed him while he was approaching, so it was probably more down to getting lucky with the skeletons than actual skill. Nito was probably easier than the 4 Kings, which is extremely rare with hyper mode builds. The skeletons make hyper mode against Nito way harder than with any other boss. You can't really take damage before the Sanctuary Guardian fight, but using Power Within and immediately resting will get you to somewhat low health. Then another cast of Power Within, because of the rest, should get you there pretty quick. I didn't even have hyper mode for most of the fight, and I was already doing 400 damage a hit. RTSR let me get 888 damage for the final hit because of counter damage too, which was pretty insane. That was probably the easiest Sanctuary Guardian fight I've ever had. Getting through the forest area can be a little difficult, but luckily I was able to get through first try and use the ramp down to Calamite to get into RTSR range before Artorias. 500 damage a hit is pretty crazy normally, let alone with range. Sure, you die in a single hit, but that doesn't really matter when you're too far to get hit by most attacks and kill him before he has a chance to use very many in the first place. It's very possible to stagger him out of buffing if you get a headshot, but that's not really necessary since it only buffs his damage and any hit kills you no matter what. The blowheads one-shot me even without the Dust Crown Ring, which makes the township almost difficult, but most are very easy to run past and the ones that aren't can be taken out from range. The Mimic is easy, but I did a super cool looking dodge past its roundhouse kick completely on purpose. The Manus fight was probably close to the hardest in the entire game, not because I needed to dodge anything, I actually just used cheese, but it was hard to stay resilient with how long it took and how fun the actual fight would have been. Manus is generally considered one of the hardest fights in the game, and the bow lets you, well, do this. If you free aim basically straight down from certain points on the ledge before the arena, you can actually hit him before even entering the fight. I used the Hawk Ring instead of Hyper Mode just because he's so far away. I'm almost positive the Hawk Ring was the better choice here. I just thought this was funny more than anything. The Calamite fight was genuinely really funny because of how fast it was. I was doing less damage than with the Painting Guardian sword build, but because of the range I actually found it way easier. This was also probably the easiest Calamite fight I've ever had. Now, for Gwyn, I was going to use Hyper Mode, but the damage was just not good enough to warrant that with how difficult it would have been to hitless Gwyn without riposting, and I'm supposed to be showing off how easy bows make the game. Instead, I grinded a bunch of souls to level up my vitality to 40, cured my curse, got the Ring of Favor and Protection by obliterating Lautrec and his buddies with range that they just could not respond to, got Havel's armor, and ran back into the arena completely naked. The armor ended up not really being worth it, since I would have needed to put it on in the middle of the fight and I wanted to show off more cheese, but it was funny to have it. If you run to the back of the arena, you can jump up onto a ledge where Gwyn can barely reach you, and you can just pelt him with arrows from there. You need to get a little lucky with the moves he does, since he can still attack you up here, but it's much easier. If he gets trapped up there, you can just jump down, but he didn't end up getting stuck until my last couple hits, and Gwyn was beaten parryless, which I think is the second time I've ever done that after the gun run. Going into this, I knew that RTSR with bows was kind of insane, and I never understood why bow only was a popular challenge run, because it's just so easy. This is a great introductory challenge run because it gets you to like use a lot of facets of the game and to relearn bosses in a really interesting way. It is, hyper mode is really difficult if you're not good at not getting hit, but I still highly recommend this run if you know the bosses well enough after soul level 1 or whatever. I know that Remastest, the mod that adds guns, actually buffs bows, which means they're probably insane in that, and I kind of want to do a bow only playthrough of that. I don't know if I'll make a video of it, but if I do, I think that'll be really interesting. Anyway, I would like to thank V, Manorock, Ryan Rickard, and FunnyGuy619 for supporting the channel. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I love you all, and I don't know how to end this.